All righty. Good afternoon. We are jumping in this a little early. Good afternoon, and hope everybody is doing well. Um, Apologize for the state of my office. I've been in the process of redoing it and reorganizing things. So please take that with the intention that it is. So want to talk about some of the things that I've been working through. As far as my projects on this month's not podcast live stream. So a couple of things that I've been working on. Just we're talking projects. There's a short story I'm going to be reading today, and I'm going to be doing a review of the Marvels and the first two episodes of Legacy of Monsters, the new Monarch series on Apple TV or Apple Plus, whatever you want to call it. So, with regards to this particular month, just a couple of things I want to get out of here. So there are 3 more episodes coming out before the end of the year. After today, I have something falling off my desk because reasons. So I have the winter updates that'll be dropping in a couple of weeks on the 2nd. 2 weeks after that, I have the actual December episode, which will have full content, and then of course the end of the month on the 30th, I will be doing the December live stream. Normally, the December live stream would be a week after the actual episode, but that is the week of Christmas, and I'm not going to do that. That would be Christmas Eve. Or close to it, and I'm just not in the mood to deal with anything on a holiday. With that being said, I want to turn my attention to talking about projects that I'm working on. So at this point, I've decided to put anything regarding book 6 on the back burner for now. I have people who are interested in book 6, but seeing as how I've literally sold like maybe 2 copies of book 5 total, I'm not really in the mood to really push the next book when I still have a lot of people who are trying to get caught up on my series. For those people who are reading it, I'd say the biggest project that I'm working on right now, or one that I've recently been gearing up for, has been this year's 250 word microfiction challenge that NYC Midnight is getting ready to do. That starts on December the 8th at midnight Eastern Time, 9 p.m. here. So I'm going to be working on that. That's going to be the big thing, the big push. But I have decided I'm going to take a stab at doing something shorter. Instead of doing a full-on novel, I'm going to work on a kid's story. It's based on some characters that my brother and I created back when we were kids, and part of a playtime stuff that we would interact with each other on. But for the most part, my projects are kind of minimum at the moment. I'm more focused really on getting content out for the YouTube channel, as well as participating in the War of the Stars podcast that I am a part of every week. If you haven't checked that out, War of the Stars is a great, fantastic podcast. You can actually check it out. We actually got picked up by Geek News Now and their network. And they're providing us with sponsors, and they're providing us with possible guests to come on to the show. But right now, we're in the middle of a 3-week run talking about what we would tweak and change about the original trilogy. We've done rewrites of the prequels. We've done rewrites of the sequels. In this case, we're going to be focusing on the original trilogy, and we actually have the first episode of that out. It's up and running now, where we redraft the the original film, Star Wars: A New Hope. And it's really mainly things that we thought were plot holes to begin with, that or have been made plot holes because of either things that pop up in the prequel films or things that pop up in the sequel trilogy. So yeah, those are the projects that I've been personally working on, that have, the majority of my attention right now. And part of that part of it is I just haven't felt really the inclination to write. Every time I sit down at my computer to do any kind of writing, all interest goes out the window, and I have nothing of value to put on paper. And I think part of that is because over the course of the last year, my work environment has changed. I'm now on my feet a lot. I'm not sitting, like, I find that when I'm in an educational setting, that's when my brain starts putting out all this material, and I can't help myself because it gives me something else to do while I'm sitting in class, or I'm behind a desk doing something. In the case of what I've been dealing with lately, my job has me on my feet, like I said, doing a lot of hands-on projects. And what I find myself doing a lot of the times while I'm thinking of ideas for stories, my brain is like, no, you're not gonna keep these. These are great ideas, but we're not gonna help you work through a problem. And normally I like hands-on projects because they give me that time to treat what I'm doing as kind of a moving meditation. And the moving meditation just doesn't play out the way I'd hope. And that's just kind of me. So yeah. But that being said, I did want to share a project that came up this fall back in August. I was part of the 500-word short story challenge that NYC Midnight put out. They came out at the end of August. And I got the results back in October. I mentioned this in last month's live stream. The story is called Sarah and the Fae, and I am actually going to be reading that to you guys today. I'm doing a live reading, and I do hope that you guys enjoy the story. Basically, the premise is that a young woman's homecoming after prior encounters with legendary creatures is interrupted by the sudden arrival of something magical. And so I do hope, what is going on with this? All right, let's try opening it again. Nope, I don't want weather. I want that to go away. All right. And so this is a 500-word short story. This was something that was really inspired. So, like, the category that I was given was fairy tale or fantasy. I turned into the skid for the fairy tale stuff. I had to incorporate hearing a train or listening to the sound of a train, and I had to incorporate an object, in this case, a butterfly. And so all of that is in the story. So hope you enjoy the story as I'm reading it to you guys. So, Sarah and the Fae, written by Garrett K. Jones. Not all fairy tales are happy stories. Sarah stooped at the faint depression in the lawn stretching out along Richmond Green as an armored figure demolished the Prince's Head pub. The chilly November air hung heavy, laden by the wanton desire to release the smallest inkling of precipitation. A light dew managed to materialize against the finely cut grass shards. She remembered listening to the shrill whistle of the train from Wales to England, the chug-chug and clickety-clack of the metal wheels, her mantra during the 4 hours she spent riding the rails across the United Kingdom. She spent 2 weeks in Swansea before this, pursuing a nasty puka terrorizing attendees at the Plantasia Tropical Zoo. The shape-shifting hobgoblin repeatedly transformed into a goat or horse and took visitors on wild concussion-inducing rides across the zoo grounds if they made contact with the creature's back. As the little beastie put it, it was just a wee bit of mischief in honor of Samhain. Sarah entered the zoo with a pair of silver spurs attached to her worn leather combat boots, driving them into the puka's sides to control it before casting the banishment charm. Before that, Sarah wrestled with a far more malicious creature in Inverness, Scotland. The Kelpie swimming in the loch began hunting on the night of the autumnal equinox, signifying the 3 days of Mabon. It swam from Inverness to Drumnadrochit to Invermoriston to Fort Augustus and back, dragging unwitting victims into the frigid dark water to feed on them. Sarah's banishment charm wouldn't stop it, resulting in her shooting and killing it with a silver bullet. Sarah briefly glimpsed the butterfly-shaped impression in the park grass. The wing's upper lobes extended into sharp, angular points like that of elf ears. The Fae's mark, its entry point from its own realm into the mortal plane, still glowed with vibrant magic. She needed to kill it, or the gateway wouldn't close. The movies and cartoons never got it right. The Fae didn't just look like miniature humans with butterfly wings. They took on a plethora of forms, most commonly something vaguely human-like when walking among mortals. And they certainly weren't benevolent visitors. Sarah hadn't planned on encountering another creature so soon after Wales. She called Richmond home, and she planned to meet some friends at the pub before heading to a football match. But the portal opened in front of her, and only she knew how to kill it. She drew a 9-inch long iron-bladed knife from her travel pack and lunged at the figure attempting to slaughter a family of 5 with a golden sword glowing like sunlight. She caught it just under the ribs, in a place unprotected by its cuirass. Purple blood oozed from the wound as the iron burned pale flesh. "You dare!" the Fae hissed. It lashed out at her, but Sarah ducked under the uncoordinated swing. She dodged once more and plunged her knife into its throat. The Fae gurgled and dropped, its gateway sealed. That is my reading of Sarah and the Fae, which was a short story that I wrote for NYC Midnight's 500-word short story challenge. I really enjoyed working on that story. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it made for it got me inspired to look into doing more dark fantasy, more horror, stuff like that. That said, I'm turning my attentions now to my reviews of the Marvels and Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, and so the this was I've been wanting to see the Marvels, not really because I was interested in it, but because I like Marvel. I enjoy the MCU for the most part, and while some of the more recent movies have been crap, I haven't really had much of a problem with it. I mean, like, a lot of people bagged on Eternals, and there are some really crappy directorial choices and story beats that really make it miss the mark. I mean, the Eternals are not characters that people normally care about anyway. But I went to it, and what I liked about it is it was devoid of the usual fast-paced, breakneck speed that most Marvel movies are known for. It kind of slowed the pacing down a little bit, and a lot of people thought that made it boring. I actually found it very intriguing. The problem I had with that movie, though, was who was the bad guy? No one really knows. I mean, it's kind of all over the place. And the character that was purported to be the bad guy, played by Bill Skarsgård, gets very little to no screen time, and he's not much of a threat at all. That being said, turning back to the Marvels, there are so many things that go wrong with this movie. First of all, like, they introduce Saber, which is the secondary, more outer space-based organization that Nick Fury sets up on top of S.H.I.E.L.D., which actually, I don't know why they didn't go with Sword. Sword would actually be better suited for something like that. because Sword is another organization, because it goes hand in hand with Sword and Shield. Shield handles things on Earth. Sword handles things out in space. Saber didn't really have anything to do with that. Saber wasn't really a thing in the comics, as far as I'm aware. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I will openly admit that I could be missing something there. But the movie focuses on the results of Captain Marvel in the last 30 years of her traversing the galaxy and trying to correct the injustices of the Kree Empire by destroying the Supreme Intelligence and that AI, which sends the Kree into a huge civil war. Everyone blames her, calls her the Annihilator, but really it's an entire planet of people who refuse to take responsibility for their own actions with one another. They want to find a scapegoat. They want to find someone else to blame rather than taking accountability. And that actually is kind of a weird echo for things that are going on here in the real world, that we have so many people that make really stupid decisions for one reason or another. And rather than taking accountability and responsibility for the choices that they have made, they want to blame somebody else. They want to put it on somebody else. And they want to hold someone else responsible because they just refuse to do so. And it happens far, far too often in this day and age. And we see it actually play out on social media, oddly enough. So that's what's going on with her. In the meantime, you've got Monica Rambeau, who the last time we saw her was in WandaVision. That's how she gets her powers. And that does get explained. So if you haven't seen WandaVision, great. But it's gonna throw you for a loop, because if you haven't watched those 9 episodes, it's going to leave you going, what witch's hex? What are you talking about? How did that happen? Why is this happening off screen? Because the general audiences don't go see shows on Disney Plus; they will go see it in movies. So there are parts of the MCU that get lost on your general audience. And then you've got Iman Vellani playing Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel, which again explains her powers in that show. Although there are some things that fall apart with the story. So like basically it's a team up story, a forced team up, forced proximity, because their powers become entangled because of the villain Dar-Ben and her whole mission to recover her Kree home planet's atmosphere and water and sun. Basically, she's trying to rip this from planets that are connected to Captain Marvel, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. There are some really weird elements in the storytelling, because it feels like the writers and the director Nia DaCosta really didn't pay attention to what happened in previous iterations of these characters' entries into the Marvel universe. As far as the MCU is concerned, like there are so many scenes where we see Captain Marvel flying through space, going completely outside the atmosphere of a planet, and she's not using her powers. She's just flying, but she's not using a protective spacesuit. There's no indication that she's using anything to protect her, and yet she's not freezing in space, which completely contradicts the established canon of what happens to human beings when they're out in the vacuum of space. We see it with Peter Quill. We see it with Rocket Raccoon. We see it with Tony Stark and Nebula. At some point, these characters encounter the vacuum of space, and they start to freeze and die and whatever. Captain Marvel, even when her powers aren't glowing all around her in that light aura, she's still completely unfazed by that. And it happens it happens frequently throughout the movie. Then there's Monica Rambeau's whole storyline. Like, at no point did it ever get brought up in WandaVision that she was resentful of Carol Danvers never coming back to Earth over the last few years, and if she had, there's no conversation going back and forth with them. The what's even more frustrating is that like her powers, like we see her do some really cool things, like she can fly because she becomes intangible. Well, her ability is to see light and to direct and conduct energy. So how does that allow her to become intangible? Intangibility has to do with molecular stability, not light. Because when light hits something, it doesn't phase through it, it hits it. That's how light works. Light works as both a ray and as a particle. Physics teaches us that. So there's no real exploration. Like I can understand her turning invisible, bending light around her. That makes sense. But her ability to turn intangible and phasing through objects and whatnot, that doesn't make any sense. The other contradiction that pops up is that it seemed to be and again, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but if there it seems that there's a contradiction with regards to Miss Marvel. Her powers were generated by the bangle that she wears. When she doesn't have it on, she's not able to use her powers. At least that's how things played out in the Miss Marvel show on Disney Plus. In this, there's a whole scene where she doesn't have either. There's two bangles, quantum bands, which leads like it could segue into the introduction of a character called Quasar, who was popular back in the late 80s, early to mid 90s in the Marvel comics, and he was a member of the Avengers for a time. And Quasar had a pair of quantum bands that allowed him to do all sorts of really cool stuff. So if there's a possibility of that character being let in, although it seems really remote, but they apparently the two bangles are they power together, they work together. But Miss Marvel at one point has her bangle taken away from her by Dar-Ben, by the villain, and it empowers Dar-Ben, and yet Miss Marvel's still able to use her powers to cast projected solid light formations. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, how's that possible if she's not wearing the bangle? Now, there's the reference in the show that it's connected to the X-Men and mutants and something else, but why would, like, unless she has a mutant gene that gets activated like it would typically be activated for mutants in the Marvel comics, why is she able to use powers without the magical cosmic bracelet that she was using? So that those couple of things. Those are the contradictions that I noticed. Another contradiction that I noticed is that if you go back and you want, so part of my biggest issue with the Marvels is that you have characters, or you have to, in order to understand half of what's happening in this movie, you have had to have watched Captain Marvel. So there's a movie, and then you'd have to have watched WandaVision, Secret Wars, or no, I'm sorry, not Secret Wars, Secret Invasion, and Miss Marvel. Okay, at least 3 shows. 4 if you count Hawkeye, because of something that pops up at the very end. Okay, and if you've at least seen Ant-Man 3, Quantumania, there's a reference to that as well. So in order, to have a well-rounded understanding of what to expect going into this film, you have to watch 2 movies, 4 shows. That's like 13, 14, 15 hours worth of content just to understand this like 100-minute movie. It's literally an hour and 45 minutes. I was out of the theater in less than 2 hours. That's how short this movie is compared to other Marvel projects of the past. And one of the things that stands out as a contradiction is that in Secret Wars, it's established. Sorry, I keep saying Secret Wars. In Secret Invasion, it is established that by Nick Fury in a statement to the series villain of that show, that he could not find a planet for the Skrulls to inhabit as refugees where they could rebuild their society and be perfectly fine. In in the Marvels, there is an entire planet full of Skrulls that are living peacefully, happily. They're rebuilding their civilization. They're thriving. What the crap? How can you sit there and tell us in Secret Invasion that there's no place for the Skrulls to exist off of Earth, and then show us a planet where they're doing exactly that? Okay, huge plot hole. Then, and this is the sequence that really kind of pissed me off. All right, this is the sequence that pissed me off. There is an entire planet that they go to, and Captain Marvel describes this planet as having 99.6% water. That means 0.4% of the entire planet's landmass is like rocky earth that you can live on. Okay, when you have a planet that is mostly water like that, which is far more aquatic than our planet, which is unique in our solar system. My thought would be, okay, well, aquatic life forms would have evolved on this planet. So we're going to see things, aliens that are maybe cetacean or fish or cephalopod in some way, shape, or form. No. Every single one of the aliens on this planet, on this watery planet with 0.4% actual land mass, are all very diverse looking humans wearing, and the costuming was beautiful. Don't get me wrong, the pageantry and the costuming was beautiful, but they're all humans. There's nothing alien about them, and their language is song and dance. Now, that would be cool, except the song and dance is not in some alien language. Song and dance is in English. And if you aren't singing, the characters look at you like, oh, that's weird. It would make more sense if their language had to be done through song because of the cadences, because of the way they've adapted and evolved their language over however many millennia or millions of years, whatever. That would be cool in the world building. No, in this case, they're singing and dancing in some kind of weird blend of Bollywood and K-pop style, and it's, oh my gosh, it's so bizarre. And I feel like they did that just so they could shoehorn in Sujun Park, who is a Korean actor, very popular Korean actor. In fact, I'm trying to. He is I don't know anything else about him other than he's been in a bunch of Korean movies on I'm assuming like streaming services and whatnot. But this is his first major role in an American production, and great, he's in there. He looks pretty. He's got long hair. He's a prince. Cool. We don't get anything else about this character's backstory other than his marriage to Captain Marvel to make her a princess was a marriage of convenience and a legal issue that he had to resolve. Boring. I would have much rather seen fish people. The closest we get to any kind of octopusy in there is the Flurkins, the goose and the cat. Apparently, Goose is pregnant and starts laying eggs all over the Saber space station in orbit around Earth. Didn't know that this was a thing. And the eggs look like brains, which is creepy and gross. And they split open. You get these tiny little kittens. They're cute and cuddly. And then they go around the space station, basically swallowing everybody. Because apparently their stomachs are some kind of pocket dimension. To rescue 300 Saber agents on a dying space station. And that's all it is. It's cats with tentacles coming out of their faces for 5 minutes. Which ultimately was probably one of the more enjoyable parts of the movie. It was funny. I will say, as I'm not a fan of the musical cats and most musical numbers, the song and dance on that water planet was really obnoxious. And the fact that they were playing the song Memories from Cats, Hated it. Hated it. Hated it. But if I was to score the Marvels, I'd probably give it a 2 out of 10. I mean, there's a lot of things that they miss that they could have really dealt with, like Kamala Khan's hero worship of Carol Danvers has an opportunity to be challenged when she realizes that that Captain Marvel has essentially been the root cause of a civil war that destabilized an entire planet and its ecosystem. I mean, how's that result? It's never touched on. There's like maybe 20 seconds of that, and if that, and they never really go anywhere with it. There's no real conflict, and even then, Dar-Ben is like a forgettable villain. Like, she actually destroys herself. Like, if the characters didn't do any of what she did, or any of what they did, I mean, sure, yeah, they saved the universe. They prevented a rip in the fabric of space-time from creating a multiversal incursion. The fact of the matter remains that if Dar-Ben had just gotten her hands on Miss Marvel's bangle in the first place, she would have torn a hole, and she would have killed herself anyway because she couldn't handle that kind of power. She was not designed or built or born to hold that kind of power. So, yeah, go figure. It does have some of the CGI looks really bad. I've seen better CGI in fan-made Star Wars films. And then there's the mid-credit scene where you're dealing with the X-Men being reintroduced, and it's probably the same Earth that Doctor Strange had gone to in Multiverse of Madness, where it's a version of that Earth, because at this point that version of Charles Xavier is dead because he was killed by Wanda. But yeah, in this case they bring in Kelsey Grammer back as Beast, which is fine, but instead of doing practical effects and makeup, they do CGI animation, which doesn't look that great. It looks like it was very unpolished and unfinished. And they designed him to look like Beast was drawn and animated in the 1990s animated series. So I feel like there's going to be some kind of tie-in to X-Men 97 on Disney Plus when that comes out sometime in the next year, whenever that's going to be. So if I was to give a grade for the Marvels, I would probably give it a 4 out of 10, and that's being generous. That's just me. But turning attention to something much, much better effects, better storytelling, better writing, better direction. My son is really big into Godzilla, loves Godzilla, and I do too, not to the same extent that my son does. My son is just like, he just absorbs it. And I've just kind of run with it. But the Monarch Legacy of Monsters series is great. The first 2 episodes aired on Apple TV yesterday. Fantastic show. I really enjoyed it. The writing is well done. The structure of it is really cool. And it starts explaining how characters are interconnected, which at first kind of threw me because one of the main characters, I'm not going to give anything away because it's brand new. I don't want to give any spoilers, but one of the last names is Randa. Randa is the name of Bill Randa, who was played by John Goodman in Kong Skull Island. And so there's a connection back to that. And in fact, there's a scene with John Goodman on Skull Island running away from a large spider creature, presumably during the events of that film, because his character does die in that film. And so I was kind of confused because Randa is an American name. Obviously the character is American, but she meets other characters in Japan who have the same last name. So I'm like, how's that connected? But they explain it in the first 2 episodes, and it's explained without really without any unnecessary exposition, which is wonderful. That's great storytelling, especially on film or in visual medium. you kind of need that for narrative purposes in a book or story. But when you're doing something with film or television, you want to have the camera do most of the legwork for that exposition, and they do a great job of that. And so there's a lot of contextual things that go into place. The special effects are amazing. The casting choices are really cool. I think probably the most inspired casting that I've encountered is the use of both Kurt Russell and his son Wyatt Russell, both of whom have been in the MCU. Kurt played Ego, the planet, and Wyatt played U.S. Agent in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And they're playing the same character, just decades apart, which is really, really cool. And because Wyatt Russell has a lot of the same mannerisms, same vocal tones, same delivery as his dad. And you can see that in the mannerisms. And I love it. I absolutely love it. Some of the best character casting I've seen in a long, long time. 2 episodes are out. The new episodes are coming out every Friday, so we're going to have new episodes all the way through like the early to mid part of January, which is cool. And so I'm definitely keeping my Apple subscription, which is relatively inexpensive, by the way. I'm keeping that through at least the start of the year. If you haven't seen Monarch Legacy of Monsters, I really encourage you guys to check it out. It's really a lot of fun. Keeps you hooked. None of the story beats seem contrived, and I'm really eager to see what the rest of how it plays out. Yeah, I would give it a 10 out of 10 at this point. And it makes me want to go back and rewatch the MonsterVerse movies in the chronological order, not the release order, but the chronological order, to kind of get, because those kind of fill in the larger beats of what's going on, because of the scope of those films. But yeah, totally worth checking out. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap up here. I like to keep my live streams relatively short. I don't want to go over too long. So let me just wrap up by saying thank you for watching. If you are interested in becoming a channel supporter, I would really, really appreciate you doing that. You can connect with Patreon. Patreon has 3 support tiers of $1, $3, and $5. All 3 tiers give you access to uncut editions of the interviews that I do for the channel. The $3 tier and above gives you access to the Creators Corner writing tips a week before they air on YouTube, and then the $5 tier gives you access to a special behind the scenes video that I do every month. This month's behind the scenes video has me doing an unboxing of the Hasbro Pulse Power Rangers Tommy Oliver Master Morpher, which I've posted pictures of on social media. It is awesome. Lights and sounds are great. The plastic is a little cheaper. I would have preferred like something more die-cast metal on the frame of the Morpher itself, but the coins have some weight to them. They have some magnetic readers that allow the device inside to change colors on the lights and do different sound effects that are actually recorded from Jason David Frank before he passed away last year, which I think we're coming up on the anniversary of that soon. So yeah, you can do that. You can also support me on Teespring. The link is also in the description. I've got shirts, mugs, all sorts of different things that you can check out there. And then, in fact, let me see if I can. Yeah, should be able to share that here. Sharing my screen. Yep, right there. You can check this out. I've got shirts for the books. I've got some new pendants, Guardian of the Heavens, and pennants, stickers. I've got my Goddess collection, which involves shirts, mugs. I've got my Right Way collection and the Push My Buttons collection. I also have phone cases and a sweatshirt. So yeah. Check all that stuff out. It would be great to have you be supporters. And then, as always, the easiest way to support what I do here is just become a subscriber, share everything. So anyway, that's it for me. Hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving if you're in America. And if you're not in America, I hope you have a wonderful end of November.